friends, June was a pretty great reading month for me. I had 2 5-star reads this month and a lot of other great reads as well. And I also read a couple of different genres this month. Last month I read so much romance that I was like, I need to pivot and read something different. So I had 2 great fantasy reads, I had a great middle grade read, and then a couple of romances because I can't just not. I mean, romance is one of my favorites, so I have to throw a couple in every month. But I only managed to read 6 books this month, which, you know, is not a competition. It doesn't matter if I read just 1 book, but for me on average that's a little low. But I think it's because summertime is just difficult. Summertime, you know, I was on vacation this month, I was out and about seeing people, doing things, you know, it just was very busy, so I don't have as much time to read as I do like in the winter months. But the 6 books I read were still incredible, so I can't wait to tell you about them. Let's jump in. The first book I read this month was called Queen of Shadows. This is a Sarah J Maas novel. This is of course part of the Throne of Glass series. This is book 4, I believe now. And I've just been slowly making my way through these. And last month I read the 3rd book, which was Heir of Fire, and loved it. I mean, I've loved every single book in this series, but this one, oh my gosh, you guys, blew my mind. And I don't know why I continue to be surprised, because this series and this author are some of my favorites. I, of course, was going to love this one as well. And this one was so much more action-packed. I loved it for that reason. The last book was a lot of like behind the scenes kind of setup of a lot of characters and different pieces coming into play. And in this book, they all kind of came together and it just kind of blew up. And I was so looking forward to that. And it did just that. It promised, it delivered, and it was everything. And, you know, so far so good. This series, I'm on book 4. Every single one has been a 5-star, but I have to say my favorite Sarah J Maas series is still ACOTAR. I mean, I don't know, I have such a special place in my heart for ACOTAR, so I know the rest of the books in this series, there are 3 more, are going to be incredible, but I just don't think they're going to top ACOTAR for me unless the next 3 are like mind-blowing. I just don't think it's going to beat out ACOTAR, but that is not to say that I don't still love this series and would highly recommend it if you love the way that Sarah J Maas writes characters and does world building and brings things together and the way she describes things. I mean, she's still an incredible author to me. I would highly recommend this series. This one is probably my favorite in the series so far, and that's been happening every single book. It's like it always beats out the book before it. So I had a great time reading this. 5 stars for me. Excited to pick up the next book and keep going with this series. The next book I picked up was a middle grade book because after I read a fantasy, it's so like me to then go in the opposite direction and read something light and airy, just so I can give my mind a little bit of a break before I jump into something intense. So a middle grade book is such a great book to do that in between all of these really heavy books. And the book I picked up was The Vanderbeekers Make a Wish by Karina Yan Glasser. This is number 5 in the series. I believe there are going to be 7 total, but this whole middle grade series has my entire heart. I can't tell you enough how much I love these kids. I love this world, and the way she writes is so sweet. If you are a fan of middle grade books and you have not picked this series up yet, you have to. It's so wholesome. The kids are so amazing. It's 5 Vanderbeek children that are part of a mixed race family. They live in New York and they go on all these adventures and they get into all sorts of mischief and trouble, but they always find their way out of it with a lot of heart and a lot of like humility, and they're just so sweet. I love these stories. This one may be my favorite because it was all about like family and found family and extended family, and it just was so good. And if you need like a hug in a book and just to pick me up, then these are really great for that. I love this one so much and I would highly recommend it. The next book I read was actually on my Kindle because I was going on vacation a couple of weeks ago. It was my husband and I's 10-year wedding anniversary, and it was the first vacation we went on without our little munchkin, which was incredible, but that's a whole nother thing. I have a vlog coming out. We went to Cabo and you can see more details in that vlog. But on that trip, I took some Abby Jimenez books. I took 2 of them and I thought I was going to read those books while I was on vacation. But when I was on the airplane, for some reason, I got this like random urge to download a Lucy Score book, and everyone has been raving about them, and I just randomly on a whim decided to download By a Thread. And oh my goodness, I am so glad I did because it was such an incredible book. I loved it so much. Like, I love when books come out of left field and they just slap you in the face and they're so amazing and you didn't even expect it. I was literally expecting to just be on this airplane ride, read a whatever kind of rom-com and just be done with it and forget about it. But this book was so good. I loved it so much. And if you get anything from this video, please go and read this. If you are a fan of romance books, it's workplace romance, it's Grumpy Sunshine, it's enemies to lovers, and listen, that sounds like a lot of tropes, and I'm not usually a fan of books where they have so many tropes thrown in all together, but this one actually did all of those really, really well. And it was such a well-written book. It's got very like Devil Wears Prada vibes. It's set in like a magazine environment, so there's all these like photo shoots, and just, it was so incredible. I can't even begin to tell you. I mean, you can just hear it from the sound of my voice how much I love this book. I will probably be buying the hard copy of it because I need this in my life. I need it physically in my life. It can't exist just on my Kindle. So I'm probably going to be buying it very soon, but highly, highly recommend. It's such a good book in the sense that it is a rom-com and it is light, but it also has a little bit of a heavier undertone with some topics that it deals with. So it's a little bit of everything, and I really enjoyed it. I'm gonna have more details for you and more thoughts about the book in my Cabo reading vlog, which is where we went. So please stay tuned for that, because it then sent me on a Lucy Score bender. So that vlog is gonna be all about kind of her books and our trip there. So look out for that coming very soon. But I love this book, 5 stars. You have to read it. So the next book I picked up after that was another Lucy Score book because I loved By a Thread so much. I was still on vacation. I didn't have any other books with me, so I was like, let me download another Lucy Score. And I'm so glad I did, because that book was Heart of Hope, and I love that. It was so sweet. It was a small town romance. Very easy breezy read. It's not like By a Thread. By a Thread was much longer and had a lot more plot development and a lot more of a slow burn type of feel. This one is very quick. You can read it probably in an afternoon if you're on a plane journey, on a train journey, whatever it is, and you just need to pass a couple of hours and have all the feel-good feelings, then this is that book. This is about Bristol and Beau, and Bristol is a single mother, and she's living in a small town with her sisters and her family. The family has just lost their youngest sister to an accident, and they're all grieving, but everybody else around her seems to be moving on after that initial period of grief, where she's kind of just stuck in a rut until a stranger, a very handsome stranger, arrives into town with a very mysterious reason that nobody can figure out, but he volunteers to help coach her little girls hockey team, and they spend time together, and obviously they're attracted to each other, and it just kind of develops from there. And then you eventually find out the reason for that stranger coming into town, and it's just such a heartfelt book. It's all about family and the small town and all the small town vibes of everyone kind of being in everyone's business and looking out for each other, and it just was so sweet and wholesome. It wasn't my favorite like type of romance small town read. I gave it like a 3-star, but because I'm now on this new journey of reading Lucy Score books, that book did solidify for me that I like Lucy Score's writing, the way that she kind of tells stories and how easy breezy it is, but also is very impactful and meaningful, all of her plots. It did convince me that I need to read more of her books. So I know there's a ton of them out there. I will be reading more in the future, but if you're looking for a very quick small town feel-good book, then this is a great one for that. The next book I picked up after that was a fantasy, and that book is called The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent, and this book has been making the rounds everywhere. Everyone has been talking about it, so I had to pick it up, and I was in the mood for a fantasy, something deep and dark and gloomy and just very layered, and this hit exactly that. I gave this 4 stars. It wasn't quite a 5-star for me, but it was very interesting. This book is about Araya, who is kind of half human, brought into the world of vampires. I mean, right there, that should just tell you on it, because I haven't read a good vampire book, I feel like, since the Sookie Stackhouse series, which was like ages ago and eons when people were talking about that. So I was really looking forward to a good vampire novel, and this one hit on just that. But it's Araya and Rain, and they are kind of like in a Hunger Games type competition for the kind of goddess of this world, Nyaxia, and whoever wins that competition is granted like any wish that they want. So Araya enters this competition hoping that at the end she can ask for this kind of special bond between her and her vampire father king, to make her into a strong being, because as a human in a vampire world, you can imagine you probably feel like a weakling and always being hunted and not having enough strength to compete against them. So that is her wish, and that is why she's entering this really dangerous competition. So it had very Hunger Games type of vibes, and everyone kept comparing it to ACOTAR. Now, you all know, I've said it enough, ACOTAR has a very special place in my heart. It's like my husband, my son, and then ACOTAR. I hold that book and that series in very high esteem. So for someone to say they compared this book and this series to that, I had high hopes going in. And while it was a very good book, girl, it was not ACOTAR, okay? Just, if you're like me and you're out there and you are a stan for ACOTAR books, this was not it. So don't go in with that pretense like I did and hoping for all the things and all the magic and unicorns, because it was not that, but it was still a good book and I would recommend it. And it left me, you know, intrigued enough to read the second book, which I have already started. I definitely think it's worth the time, but let's not go so far as to say it's like ACOTAR. So just my personal opinion, but not as good. But definitely interesting and worth a read. I gave it 4 stars. And then the last book I picked up this month was a romance because I just wanted to go out on a softer level. And so I picked up Tessa Bailey's Unfortunately Yours. This is the second book after Secretly Yours, which came out earlier this year. I did read that one and I would recommend reading it in order because the characters do appear in each of the books. And that one I gave a 3 star and this one I'm giving a 3.5. So not much better, but slightly better in my opinion. This one is the sister of the male character in the first book. These 2 books I had such high hopes for because I loved It Happened One Summer and then Hook, Line, and Sinker. It Happened One Summer is still like my favorite Tessa Bailey, and then Hook, Line, and Sinker. But I thought these 2 books were going to be very similar to those, and they just were not. They fell a little flat for me. I mean, I love the setting. It's in the West Coast, it's in California, in wine country. It's got a lot of great aesthetics, and the characters had a lot of promise as well. This one is kind of enemies to lovers, and I love enemies to lovers like most people, but I just don't think they did it that well. And I don't know what's happening with Tessa Bailey for me. I mean, I just started so high with It Happened One Summer, and progressively they've just gotten worse for me. I think what it is about her writing that still draws me in is that she does do really great banter, and she does write really great scenery, and tries to include like a heavier topic in each of her books, but this one just did not quite hit for me. Neither did Secretly Yours, but for different reasons. But with this one, it's August and Natalie, and they have kind of agreed to this like marriage of convenience, so each of them could get some funding for different reasons that they need in their life. And the enemies to lovers part, I don't know, it just wasn't enemy enough for me, I guess. They kept going back and forth. It was a little confusing because they were into each other, not into each other, trying to be enemies, not trying to be enemies. It was kind of confusing for me. It was okay. I mean, I would recommend, if you've run out of things to read on your TBR, which if you're like me, you've never run out of things, but if it happens to you, you know, and you're on a random kind of just afternoon or evening, or you don't have many weekend plans and you want to read it just for kind of that wine country aesthetic and a okay book, then I guess this book would be for you. But I don't feel like I'm really selling it because I'm just not that excited, and I'm like pitching it to you like, do it if there's absolutely nothing else you have left to do in your life, which is kind of the vibes I'm giving you. But it's not that bad. It's just also not that good. It just was very mediocre for me. I don't know much more to say to you. Read it if you want. Read it if you need closure. But for me, it was kind of a meh kind of read. So maybe it's time I take a break from Tessa Bailey books. So those are the 6 books I read this month. I'm really glad that I read a few different genres because it did make the reading month more interesting, and I think I need to stick to that. I think when I read just one type of genre, I get bored really easily. So for the month of July, I have some really great fantasy, middle grade, romance, and even some thrillers I think lined up. So I'm gonna keep it going. And this month I have a lot more time to read, so I'm really hoping that I can just smash out some books. We're home this month, and it's really hot in July here, so I think I'll be spending time indoors and hopefully getting some good reading done that I can't wait to tell you about. I've also got some really great like vlogs planned. I might be rereading ACOTAR because I've said it so much now that I feel like my heart is craving it. I'm also going to be talking about some nonfiction books next week, so please stay tuned for those videos. But thank you so much for watching today, and I'll catch you next time.